Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom, there was a small village called Golden Leaf Town. This village was home to many animals, but the most numerous were the cats and dogs. However, an ancient rule had governed this town for generations: cats and dogs could never be friends. No one knew exactly when or why this rule had been established, but it was deeply ingrained in the minds of all the animals. From the moment a kitten or a puppy was born, they were taught that the other species was their natural enemy. Dogs were told that cats were sneaky, untrustworthy creatures, always plotting against them. Cats were warned that dogs were wild, reckless beasts that could not be reasoned with. And so, from one generation to the next, the conflict continued. Whenever a dog saw a cat, it would bark and chase after it. Whenever a cat saw a dog, it would arch its back and hiss. The town was filled with the sound of barking and yowling, with endless chases down the streets and over rooftops. Even the village elders had long since accepted this as a way of life. No one dared to challenge the rule, until one day, two unusual animals were born. A young orange tabby kitten named Felix and a small black puppy named Pluto came into the world, destined to question everything they had been taught. Felix was clever and curious, always eager to explore beyond what he was told. Pluto was playful and full of energy, always excited to discover new things. Unlike the other cats and dogs in town, Felix and Pluto didn't feel hatred toward each other. They didn't understand why they were supposed to be enemies, but their families made sure to remind them, "Stay away from dogs," Felix's mother warned him. "They are loud, aggressive creatures who will chase you for no reason." "Never trust a cat," Pluto's father growled. "They are sneaky little tricksters who will lead you into a trap." And so, both Felix and Pluto grew up hearing these warnings, yet deep inside, a part of them wondered, was it really true? The village's biggest event of the year was approaching, the annual Animal Games. This was a grand competition where all the animals would test their skills in various challenges. The cats had their own set of contests, while the dogs had theirs. Each year, both sides competed fiercely, but they never mixed. This year, Felix and Pluto were finally old enough to participate, and both of them were eager to prove themselves. The night before the games, curiosity got the better of Felix. He sneaked out of his home and crept toward the dog training grounds. Hidden behind a tree, he watched in amazement as the dogs practiced their running. Pluto was among them, sprinting across the field with incredible speed. "Wow," Felix whispered to himself. "I never knew dogs were so fast." At the same time, Pluto had the same idea. He sneaked over to the cat training grounds and hid behind a bush. He watched as the cats leaped gracefully from rooftop to rooftop, balancing on narrow ledges with ease. "Incredible," Pluto murmured. "I never knew cats could be so agile." But before they could observe any longer, their presence was discovered. "What are you doing here?" the cats hissed at Pluto. "Get out, cat!" the dogs growled at Felix. Both of them ran for their lives, returning to their own groups, but something had changed. They had seen each other's strengths, and a new thought had begun to form in their minds. Perhaps the stories they had been told were not entirely true. The day of the competition arrived. The village was buzzing with excitement. The cats and dogs gathered in separate sections, ready to cheer for their own kind. The competitions began: speed races, high jumps, agility tests. The cats excelled in climbing and balancing. The dogs dominated in endurance and raw power. It was just like every other year, until the final event, the Champions Challenge. This was the most prestigious event of the day. The winners of the previous competitions would face off in a final test of skill, and for the first time in history, the two finalists were Felix and Pluto. The audience fell silent. A cat and a dog? facing each other? This is absurd. This goes against tradition. But the referee had spoken. The competition had to proceed. Felix and Pluto stepped into the arena. They looked at each other, both knowing what was expected of them. They were supposed to fight to prove which species was superior, but neither of them wanted that. "We don't have to do this," Felix whispered. "But if we don't, they'll be angry," Pluto murmured back. Felix's eyes sparkled with an idea. "Then let's give them something they've never seen before." Without warning, Felix leaped onto Pluto's back. The audience gasped. Pluto, understanding Felix's plan, took off running at full speed. Felix balanced perfectly, using his agility to stay on Pluto's back. Together, they performed a breathtaking display. Pluto raced around the arena with lightning speed while Felix timed his jumps, soaring higher than any cat ever had. They weaved through obstacles, dodged hurdles, and executed perfectly synchronized movements. The entire village watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen such a performance before. As their final move, Pluto launched himself into the air, and Felix sprang from his back, performing a flawless somersault before landing gracefully. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a small dog in the audience began to clap. A cat joined in, then another, and another. Soon, the entire village erupted into cheers. That day, everything changed. The old rule was questioned, then broken. The cats and dogs no longer saw each other as enemies. They began training together, learning from one another. Cats helped dogs become more agile. Dogs taught cats the power of teamwork. Felix and Pluto became legends, their story passed down through generations. And so, the village of Golden Leaf Town was no longer divided. It became a place where differences were not feared, but celebrated. For the first time in history, the cats and dogs of the village were no longer rivals, they were friends. Do you still like today's story? If you like, please remember to subscribe to this channel and click the like icon. You can receive notifications and hear the latest stories as soon as possible. Good night, my baby.